Hello, Slicey Dicers. This is Brian with another knife review for you. Today, we have a bit of a classic, but also kind of a different take on a classic. This is a Buck 110. They've been making these since 1963. Probably one of the best-selling knives in U.S. history. Just a great knife, big, folding backlock hunting knife. But this one is a bit unique. This is an exclusive from Smokey Mountain Knife Works, SMKW.com. I will say they've never given me a dime, but I have to say I love this place. They are one of my favorite places to buy knives. They are in Tennessee, hence the catchy name Smokey Mountain Knife Works. I live in upstate New York, and I get stuff from them almost Amazon fast. Every time I order it, 2-3 days, it's in my mailbox, and that's pretty great. So that's one of the main reasons why I use them. Also, they're super nice. I've had to call and ask some questions on some orders before, and they were super great. I had to change an order once after it had said it already shipped, but luckily it hadn't left the building yet, and they changed it, no questions asked. Great guys. I love this place, guys and gals. I've gotten both when I've called. Awesome place. I highly recommend smkw.com, Smoky Mountain Knife Works. But this is one of their exclusives. Why did I buy this? Well, it's a Buck 110, and I don't have one. Never owned a Buck. And the more I get into these, this knife reviewing thing, I can't quite call it a job yet, but whatever you want to call it, I feel like there's some stuff I need to have. I've known for a while I got to get a Buck 110 because everybody has one. They're great for size comparisons. They've made a bazillion of them. Everybody knows what size a Buck is, and I just need to get one. But it wasn't quite my thing, so I was looking for a special one. I just in the back of my mind, I almost bought one of the, standard $30, $40 ones, and I didn't. And I almost bought the lightweight one, and thought, that's kind of cheating. And then I thought, well, I'm just going to wait till a special one hits me. And since I buy a lot of stuff from Smoky Mountain Knife Works, I get the catalogs. And a couple weeks ago, I got this. And it's the Cover Girl, $99.99. Which is quite a bit of money to spend for a Buck 110, but a lot of exclusive stuff I would like. It has a pocket clip. It's got a thumb disc for one-hand opening. And I like the torched bone that it comes with, which is also an exclusive thing. And on the scales, and I just thought, hey, you know what? I think maybe that's the one for me. 420HC. I like the nickel-plated better than the brass. And I thought, all right, I guess it's a message from God. I'm going to buy it. So I bought it. And I have another kind of similar knife, much smaller, but I have a case trapper lock, which is kind of the same thing, a very traditional design, but one-hand open pocket clip knife. And I love this thing, and I thought, well, maybe I'll love that too. So I'll give it a shot. I mostly love it. There are definitely some issues I have with this particular Buck 110, but we'll get to that later. Let's do some size comparisons before we get into the nitty-gritty. You have an overall length of just over 8.5 inches. Again, these are half-inch squares. Blade length, 3.75 inches. You have a blade thickness of 0.125 inches. Obviously, that's not at the thumb stud. That's at the thickest part of the actual blade. And you have a handle thickness of, sure we got this right here, about we're going to call that about 0.6 inches. Pretty thick blade, but not really. Pretty thick handle, but not too bad. I think I almost broke my scales there, or my calipers, whatever they are. Weight. There we go. Make sure that's all zeroed. Not light. 7.75 ounces. It's a bit of a heavy knife, but we know this. It's kind of a traditional construction. It's a big sucker. That was not a shock to me at all. And this has the added little bit of weight of the pocket clip and the thumb disc. So let's do some size comparisons really quick, just to give you an idea of this in more of a visual sense. We'll start out with, we have a Benchmade 940 here. So it's even bigger than that, which is actually, that's a fairly long knife. We'll do, for consistency's sake, we're going to do the Spyderco Paramilitary 2, longer than that. There's going to be a bit of a theme here. We have the Spyderco Mannix 2, again, longer than that. It's a very long knife. And then, let's show that trapper lock. I almost thought about doing a comparison between these two, and then I realized how different they are in size. And you read the stats, but then you see them face to face, and you're like, oh, there's no point in comparing these two. The only things they have in common is they're traditional kind of construction, roughly the same price, and have one hand open and they're locking and pocket clips. But other than that, there's not really much they have in common. So I don't think I'm going to bother doing the comparison on these. But and then lastly, just to show how big this thing is, this is one of the biggest folders that I have. This is a Cold Steel Recon 1. It's not that much smaller than a Recon 1. It's a lot of knife. That was a lot of little visual aids to sum up with, it's a lot of knife. So let's move on from that. Let's talk about this particular one itself, this Buck 110 Smokey Mountain Knife Works exclusive version. I do really like the look of it. I love this this torch bone. I think it looks beautiful. Fit and finish in a lot of the important ways is really nice. This nickel is really well done. There's no scratches or anything. You can kind of see the pin in it, but just barely. Everything is smooth. There are no sharp bits at all. Nothing that I felt like I need to take down with sandpaper or anything. Everything is just really nicely smooth. You can run your hand over every part of this knife except the blade and not worry about scratching yourself at all. Just very, very nice in that way. I do have one issue with it. The blade centering is not perfect. It's not horrid. It's not hitting the sides or anything, but it's not great. That was an issue I had. It was very gritty and stiff when I got it. I dripped some 5-weight nano oil in there and just worked it and worked it and worked it. And it not only got smoother, it did kind of help the blade centering a bit, but it's still not good, as you can see. Yeah, and it's kind of almost inconsistent. Sometimes I open it, or sometimes I close it and it looks centered. Sometimes it looks a bit off. There is no blade play whatsoever, though. I have to say, this thing is rock solid. No blade play whatsoever. So it's all right. Maybe it's a bit of a warped blade. I don't know exactly what it is, but it's not perfect and the blade centering by any means. Yeah, see, that time I closed it and it looks a little more centered. So it just kind of depends on how you close it, whatever. The only other fit and finish issue I have is this swedge up here is a bit rough. The blade grind's pretty good. I'm not going to complain about that. That's definitely acceptable. But this is pretty rough up here. I mean, you're not ever going to be touching it, but, you know, this is a $100 knife. It's not terribly inexpensive. So that's a bit annoying. But, yeah, a few fit and finish issues. I had a lot of people, I did an unboxing video for this, and a lot of people replied and said, oh, Bucks are all junk. They're terrible, and I guess I kind of get it. I have seen a lot of complaints about, you know, basic Buck 110s and stuff, but this is a higher end one. I do think they put a bit more effort in it. It has a few little issues, but it's not bad. For $99.99, is that acceptable? That's up to you. I've shown you completely honestly what's wrong with it. So if that's acceptable to you, it is. If it isn't, it isn't. But for this particular one, me personally, I'm not ecstatic about it, but I would call it acceptable. As far as the blade goes, it's a Buck 110. It's their 420HC. This is the first experience I've had with it. As I said, it's very much a hollow grind. It's very thin behind the edge. Let's do... this is always such a hard measurement to get, but yet, all of us YouTubers keep banging our heads against this wall and trying to get it right. But yeah, I think it's as close as I'm going to get. Yeah, about 19.5, 20 thousandths behind the edge. Not too bad. It does cut very well. I have been using it quite a bit. I've had it for, I don't know, 4 or 5 days. I've been using it a whole lot. It cuts fine. Great piercer. Just what you expect from a classic clip point kind of blade. It did come pretty sharp out of the box. I have not touched it, and it's still, you know, cut and paper, you know, slicey. I used it, cut up some cardboard, had to cut up a couple boxes, used it for that. It's a good blade. Now, the first question I got when people show this is, does that thumb disc get in the way? Short answer, yep, it does. I will get to more on this later. I wish the thumb disc was back about the width of the thumb disc. I wish it was centered here instead of here. Not only does it get in the way cutting, I think it would make it easier to open. It's not the end of the world. You still have plenty of blade to use here, But yeah, when you're hacking cardboard and stuff, I did hit that thumb disc a couple times. It wasn't the worst thing ever, but it does kind of in a lot of ways almost limit, like virtually limit the blade length. I do wish this was back farther, but it looks great. And for sharpening and stuff, you can just pop it off, and it is removable, so you can just pop it off and clamp, on the blade to sharpen it. And if you're doing some long-term cutting task, something, you can just pop it off for that. But I do wish it was here instead of here. But that's about all I have to say about the blade. It's what you'd expect. I do kind of wish for $99.99. I didn't know until I got this, that because I'm not a buck guy. I didn't know they made an S30V version. For $99.99, I kind of wish this was the S30V blade. I guess that's the only other criticism I have about the blade. All right, let's talk about ergonomics. Ergonomically, it works great. They did it's a buck 110. They're very good ergonomic knives. I think that they did a very good job with this pocket clip. There's just the slightest hint of a hot spot right here. But for a knife that was never meant to have a pocket clip, that they did it that well. They adapted a knife that wasn't meant to have one. I think they did a pretty good job. I mean, you can feel it. It's there. But it's not horrid. It's nothing that really bothers me, and my hands aren't. I don't have the toughest hands in the world. Like all buck 110s, if you squeeze really hard, I always kind of feel this pointy thing. I have held other buck 110s before, but it's just that's a bit annoying. But ergonomically, it's basically a buck 110. You get a bit of a hot spot from the pocket clip, but honestly, it's pretty good. As far as it carries, better than I thought. I think that's the thing I'm most impressed by with this, because it's damn near 8 ounces. They did a really good job with the pocket clip, though. It carries fairly deeply, not super deep, but it's just such a small, narrow. I guess what's that? Yeah, it's a short, it's a very narrow package in the pocket, and I thought it carries really well. I had it in my pocket for a few days, and I could still reach right past it to get other stuff out. Obviously, this is all as smooth as can be, so there's nothing to worry about catching your fingers on or anything, reaching out of your pocket. I really did like having it in my pocket. It wasn't bad at all. The weight was definitely noticeable, but as far as just getting out of the pocket, it wasn't bad. Now, deployment, as you just saw, let's do that again. The location of the thumb stud, I have really long fingers, guys. My thumb isn't as exaggeratedly long as my other fingers are, but still, I got pretty long fingers. And just the location of this thumb disc, you can see it's kind of a thing. I kind of have to move my hand around a bit. Yes, it is definitely one hand open, but it's not like you're just going to go whack. Since it's the closest thing I had to compare it to, on my trapper lock, is just super easy. One movement and it's open. It's very easy to open. This is always, it's not quite gymnastics or anything to get it open, but it requires some effort to one hand open it. Part of that is because it's a very heavy back spring. The first couple times I opened it, I had a much harder time. I've kind of learned more with it. That's where this came from. I will admit, this knife did bite me. It got to about here, and I had my finger in there like an idiot, and it dropped back down. That was more my fault than the knives. But yeah, that does take some effort, and it's definitely two-hand open, obviously, because it's got the back lock all the way back here. So there's no way you're going to one-hand close this thing. But it's something that takes some thought. I've obviously gotten used to it. You just watch me do it several times, but it is kind of moving your hand around a bit. Again, maybe there's not enough leverage. Maybe that's why the thumb disc is here. It probably is. Maybe if it was back here, there wouldn't be enough leverage to one hand open it. But I've seen other companies that make bolt-on thumb discs for these, or thumb studs for these, and most people keep them located back a lot farther, and they don't seem to have a problem. So I'm not sure. I think that's because this comes straight from Buck. Maybe Buck thinks it needs to be way out here. Not sure I agree with that. But other than that, it is cool that it has the thumb disc. It has that option. And if it annoys me as far as being in the way of the cutting edge, I can just remove it. But so overall, what are my conclusions on this knife? $99.99 is a bit much. I do really like it. I'm definitely going to keep it. I need to have a Buck 110. I think for knives Buck 110s made by Buck and not modified afterwards, this is probably the one that I would get anyway. I do like the torched bone. I do like the nickel. I like a lot of. I think the pocket clip is as good a job as you could have possibly done trying to bolt a pocket clip onto a buck 110, which is a big heavy knife that was never meant to have one. The thumb stud does work, but if I had to do it again, for this price, I probably would say forget the pocket clip and get an S30V. They make one right now that's I saw for $80 with the nickel and G10, and then I would just buy the $8. I can't remember the company now. I'll try and remember and put it in the links down below. That makes a really nice thumb disc for it. I say that because my son handled this. I let him handle a whole bunch of my knives. I'm going to put my money where my mouth is on this because my son handled a whole bunch of my knives. I wanted him to get a knife he'd keep forever for graduation, and he chose this. He wanted a buck 110. Not particularly this one, but he wanted a buck 110. So I'm getting him an S30V with some custom engraving, and then I'm going to get the little thumb, the thumb flicker open for it. He's lefty, so this wouldn't work anyway. This is right-handed only. But I will say that about Buck. It is a knife he's going to keep forever. I do know that. Like, there are some little production issues I have with this, but I don't think they're ever going to get any worse. Because they are very solidly built. I just think their tolerances aren't quite as great. But, I mean, it does say right on the box, this is the box it came in, forever warranty. And I've heard nothing but great things about their warranty. So, it is a knife that I'll probably have this forever because I do need to have a buck 110 around, and this is the one I've got. And I'm probably not going to bother to sell it and go out and buy another one. But there are some things, I love about it. I love the look of it. I do like the blade, other than that thumb disc being in the way. And that's, one of the most important things about a knife is if you like the blade or not. It's pretty, 89% of it is very well made. It's just that blade centering issue and the grind on the swedge is really the only two things I can really complain about. But would I buy another one? I'm not so sure. But I like this one enough to definitely keep it. And if you want a pocket clip buck 110 with a thumb disc, it ain't bad. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this and found this somewhat informative. I hope you guys have come to a conclusion. I'm not sure I even have, but I hope you have. I've been Brian. Have a good one.